Okay. Hey, welcome. Yokoso owashitare. Here we've got another story. This one's going to be a little bit longer, but it's a lot of fun. I enjoyed this one. Not my favorite, but it's still good. I'll let you be the judge of how good it is. Anyways, once upon a time, there was an old sumo man from Michinoku by the name of Makami no Narimura. He was the father of Makami no Tamemura and the grandfather of Makami no Tsunenori. Now, honestly, out of all of those names, you really only need to remember one, Narimura. Makami no Narimura. He's the only guy who actually matters, but because this is an old Japanese story and it has his lineage in there and notable people that he's related to, it's in there. Don't worry about it, though. Just remember Narimura. He's the main character. He's the MC. But Narimura was a sumobito. Sumaibito? Sumobito, which some of you may know is a term for sumo. And at this time in Japanese history, I think even multiple times a year, but occasionally they would have a very big sumo competition in the capital of Kyoto. Back then it was called Heian, which was known as the Sumai no Sechie. Now, when you hear the term sumo, you've probably already got a pretty distinct image in your mind of what you're thinking of. You're thinking of really big fat dudes wearing weird, very little clothing, those weird little like diaper belt thingies that they wear, and they've got the ring, and they've got the dirt floor, and they've got the guy in the robes with the funny hat, and he's the one doing the refereeing. You probably have that image in your mind. And quite frankly, while some of that carried over from these ancient times, sumo was a general term for really strong men. Like a sumo competition was less about a really well-defined kind of tournament, wrestling tournament, and more just a competition of strength between really strong guys. And now back in the day, although sumo people, sumobito, although they kind of wore a lot of the same what they wear now, which is really not a whole lot. Back in the day, it wasn't as rigidly defined. It wasn't as concreted as it is now. A lot of things were more legal back then. Like, I do believe they could hit each other in different ways that they're not allowed to now. There were moves that they could do. And there was no ring like there is today. It was just you go until the other guy gives up or he falls to the ground. And now the other thing about sumos at this time is they weren't by necessity super big and huge guys. Now, generally speaking, huge dudes are going to have a significant advantage over not huge dudes. Trust me, I did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for a little bit, and as a white belt, I rolled with another white belt who was 300 pounds, and let's just say it did not go well for me. Let's just leave it at that, because I don't want to go into detail and embarrass myself. How poorly it actually went. But, being big is very helpful. So a lot of these guys were big, but not necessarily. So that is just a big fancy way of saying that sumo 1,000 years ago had some ways in which it was similar to the way it is now, but there were lots of ways in which it was different. But anyway, our guy, Narimura, was a sumo wrestler. He was a sumo-bito, a sumo guy. And they were having a big sumo festival in the capital at this time. And this was big, let me just tell you. Huge event. Like, it was presided over and watched by the emperor himself. And not only did they have like all of these high-ranking nobles who were watching it, but they had other things going on. They had dances, they had other performances, they probably had food. Basically, it was like one big festival that they were all taking part in. It was a big occasion. The other thing is they had sumo wrestlers coming from all over the country. It wasn't like this was just a local thing that only the capital did. Like, they had people come in from everywhere, because if you won, you could win not only prestige, but you could win tons of money, tons of other gifts. I don't really know what you could win, but it was a big deal. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say. It's just a big deal. It's a big deal. Huge. So, Narimura shows up to the capital to participate in this big sumo tournament. And he and a bunch of other sumo guys, even though they were competing against each other, they were all friends. They were all pals. They hung out together. They stayed in the same places. They were sponsored by the same people. They were just kind of big comrades, big friends who all came together over this sport of really, really massive men slapping and throwing each other while wearing very little clothing, as men do. Now, you also have to remember that these sumo guys were kind of like ancient Japanese jocks. They were professional athletes, and they were dedicated to their craft. But a lot like professional athletes and a lot like jocks, they were big, manly men. They behaved really masculinely in the best and the worst ways, as you're going to see. But one day, just a day or two before the actual competition, Narimura is hanging out in the capital with his sumo bros. They're all just big chilling. But the thing is they weren't actually chilling because it was really, really hot. It was the middle of summer, and they really wanted to find a place to go cool down. So they went to the Suzaku Gate, which was like the main gate that led into the Imperial Palace grounds. And as such, there were a lot of areas of interest around, and there was a lot of business going on there. And so they went there to cool themselves off. I don't know exactly how they were going to cool themselves off, but needless to say, there was something around there that they could go and cool themselves off. But as they get done enjoying cooling themselves off, they decide that they wanted to go back home or go back to wherever they were staying. And the fastest way would be go east down this road. But ahead of where they were going was the college dorms. The Daigaku-ryo is what it was called. And it's basically where all of the brainy people, it's where all the nerds hung out. It's where all the scholars hung out. It's where they all went and they learned about ancient Chinese classics and how to write properly and, just nerd stuff. Like they learned ancient East Asian scholarly pursuits, But suddenly, these scholarly gentleman types had their peace just destroyed by this big old herd of massive jock sumo guys, some of whom were probably drunk, and they're being like typical jocks, They're palling around, they're laughing, they're being boisterous, probably talking about like football and chicks and, beer or whatever, even though they didn't have beer and they didn't have football, but they did have chicks. But, they were just typical sportsy jockey type of a stuff. They were just being really loud and obnoxious about it. And also at this time, there were a lot of college students, we'll just call it the college, even though college probably isn't the best way to describe it, but it's called a daigaku, which is what you can call college in modern times. So it was college kids, young scholarly types, okay? They're college kids. That's what I'm going to call them. But anyway, a bunch of these college kids were all hanging out outside the dorms, hanging outside this scholarly area to cool off as well. And again, suddenly this big gaggle of just boisterous sumo bros just laughing and yelling and hooting and hollering all over the place just comes strolling down the road, and this just slaps them out of their studies. Like their focus is completely broken, and all of them are annoyed. And so soon they started hearing shouts of, "Oh my gosh, it's so obnoxious. Somebody shut them up. Holy." They were just really, really annoyed. And so a bunch of these college kids, a bunch of these scholars got together, and they made, in a huge human wall, they just blocked off this road that these sumo guys were trying to go down. This was their way of stopping all of this. And specifically among them, there was one guy who was wearing a little bit nicer hat, head thing, and a little bit nicer robes, who was also a little bit shorter than most of them. He seemed to be kind of like the ringleader. Like he was getting all the rest of them worked up and egging them on to try to get them to stop and block this road for these boisterous sumo guys to go through. Now, this was rather disrespectful to these sumo guys. I mean, they were kind of like mini celebrities. Like, they brought in a lot of business. A lot of people came to see their tournaments. And to have these stupid little nerdy soy boys get in their way and try to force them to take the long way around back to where they needed to stay, that was really annoying. How dare they? Who do they think they are? Now, these sumo guys, being really big and really strong, if they had wanted to, they probably could have just strolled right on through, just broke through and said, "Get out of our way. We don't care for you stupid little nerds, freaking geeks," or something to that effect. But it was so sudden, and also, it's good to have appearances. These scholars were not looked down on in society. They were held in fairly high esteem. So you didn't want to just go upsetting them for no reason and causing problems where you didn't need to have them. So while these sumo guys were probably getting all riled up thinking about how they were going to knock these stupid scholars down a peg or two, Narimura, who's kind of like the ringleader of all the sumos, just looks around, looks back to his guys and says, "Easy now, boys. You know what? We'll just take the long way around this time." And he said that while giving him a nice steely gaze, letting them know this time he's letting him get away with it. But this is not going to happen next time, capiche? Something kind of like that, something vaguely threatening. So all the sumo guys turn back, and they head back to the Suzaku Gate, and I'm assuming all of the scholars went back to their studies, went back to their nerd things, which, no offense, I'm a nerd. I like nerdy things. That's what this project is. This is just me being a nerd, okay? But seriously, I can kind of understand, like, they're loud and obnoxious, but if you just batten down the hatches, they would have been gone. wouldn't have taken him that long. Why you gotta, I don't know, conflict. But so the sumo guys all gather around at Suzaku Gate again. And they're all just kind of talking to each other and just getting annoyed. And they're so upset. Like, how dare these stupid scholars get in our way like that? And so Narimura, again, being kind of like the ringleader of all the sumo guys, he just says, you know what? We can't let these guys get away with this. They're going to have to answer for this. And we are definitely going to break through that stupid little blockade that they've got going. But we're not going to do it today. We're going to wait for tomorrow. I'll bet you if we do the same thing, they will respond in kind. And tomorrow, we'll show them what for. We'll give it to them good. And then Narimura turned to another sumo wrestler who is going to appear multiple times, so I'm just going to name him Carl. That's just the first name that came to mind, Carl. So Narimura turns to Carl, and he says, hey, you remember that short guy who seemed to be the ringleader of all of them? I want you to go kick his butt until it bleeds. And again, I do want to point out that it literally says, go kick his butt. That's what the story actually says. Like, the actual words are, Otoko no shiashiri o chi ayubakari ni ketamae, which literally translates to, kick the guy's butt until blood comes out. Good sir, because the last little bit is actually like an honorific command. He's being very polite to this guy. He's being very honorific, which I'm not going to go into a detailed explanation about ancient classical Japanese and how it works. You're not here for an ancient Japanese language lesson. You're here for a story. So that's what we're going to go with. But anyways, Carl, hearing this, he just thumps his chest and he says, with pleasure, I promise you, I'm going to get that little pipsqueak. I'll show him. I'll take my foot and send it right up his rectum. And he meant it too, because Carl was actually bigger and stronger, faster and younger than most of them. Carl was no joke. So after coming up with this plan and complaining to themselves a little bit more about the stupid nerds that got in their way, they all went their separate ways. They went back to wherever they were staying. And, time passes. Next day, they all meet up again at this gate. But word had also gotten around among the other sumo people. And so when they had all met up, even more sumos joined them because they cannot stand for this. How dare anybody get in our way? This is an affront to all of us. So even more of them showed up. And they all made their way down the road, just like last time, straight for the Daigakuryo, the college dorms. But if there's anything about scholars, is that they're not stupid. And they foresaw this happening, and they too had reinforcements. So, once again, when this huge gaggle of sumo guys comes hooting and hollering down the road, they were ready, and the scholars all got out into the road and blocked the road again with an even increased number. And they were even more loud in their, shut up, go away, we don't want you here. So clearly, this is setting up for a pretty big conflict. But again, the sumos now had decided that they weren't going to go away. They were going to go barrel through these silly little soy boy nerds. And it's about this time that Carl, being the bigger, stronger, kind of their ace in the hole, the trick up their sleeve, he starts hitching up his pants, his big billowy pants, so that he can move around freely, like he's getting ready for business. And he took one big run. He made one attempt himself. He tried to break through them just alone, just run straight at their line, but there were so many of them, and there was only one of him, so he failed. And it was at this time that he saw him, the ringleader, the other scrawny soy boy college kid who was kind of working everybody else up into a frenzy. He saw his quarry. He had a mission. He needed to kick that guy in the butt. And that's what he was going to do. So instantly, Carl comes running over to this guy. And he takes his foot and he winds it up for a kick that's going to send this guy to the moon. Like he's just going to knock him out of the park. It's going to be deadly. Like, how dare this arrogant SOB make a mockery of us? I'll show you. But right as he let the kick swing, right as he let his leg go and just boom, this guy saw what was happening. And in a very deft, swift move, dodged at the last second. Whew. Because he was kicking with such force and he missed, the follow through is too much and he falls flat on his back. And at that point, all the sumo guys just stopped, like, oh shoot. And then before anybody had any real reason to react, any time to react, this nerd, this scrawny little punk, grabs Carl's leg and he starts running at these guys. And this guy, this leg that he's carrying, this sumo wrestler that he's got in his hand, didn't seem to weigh any more than a stick to him, than an actual stick. And so he runs at these sumo guys, and they all of a sudden just go, oh boy, and they take off. They take off running. And as they're running, this scholar takes Carl and just hucks him. He just throws him through the air. And Carl goes flying maybe, 12 yards or so is what I calculated it out to be, about 12 yards. And he just comes slamming on the ground and boom, he's out. He's not moving anymore. And he doesn't. He's just there. Boom. And at that moment, this ringleader, this scholar ringleader guy, turns and he locks eyes with the ringleader of the sumos, Narimura. Our guy, Narimura. And at that moment, what went through Narimura's head was something like, holy, this guy is way stronger than I had given him credit for. What he probably actually said was something more like, oh, fuck, because this guy starts sprinting straight for him. And Narimura, with nowhere else to go, like he can't go forward because there's a entire wall of scholars in his way, and there's buildings on either side, he just turns around and he starts running back towards the Suzaku Gate. He just starts running as fast as he can with this guy, this scholar, in hot pursuit. Now, they make it to the gate. Narimura makes it to the gate, and if you know anything about Japanese gates, you have the main gate with the big doors that carriages are supposed to go through. But then you have on the side a smaller, like, human-sized gate that you could fit one or two people through. And that was for, in case somebody needed to go around and open the gate from the other side or take care of business or whatever. This was the person side, and then you had the main side with the carriages, for the carriages and the horses and whatnot. But Narimura and this scholar make it to the Suzaku Gate, and Narimura just barrels right through the side door of the gate, trying to escape this guy. So basically, they're running through the palace grounds now. Narimura turns around and sees that this guy is still right on his heels, and just when he's about to think that I've been caught, it's over, I'm going to get my butt kicked by this guy, he notices a fence, and he leaps straight over the fence as far and as hard as he can, just takes off. And he manages to clear the fence, and right at the last second, he goes, oh, I'm free, I'm safe. And he was safe. He did actually clear the fence, and the guy didn't quite catch him. However, at the last second, this scholar guy reaches out and grabbed for him. And although he missed Narimura's leg and didn't actually get anything that he could grab onto, he did manage to grab Narimura's shoe, which I don't understand how exactly this works, but when he yanked off Narimura's shoe, it also tore off some of the skin on Narimura's heel. Again, I wasn't entirely sure about how it worked, but Narimura hits the ground, probably rolls and splatters out, but he's okay. And he gets up, and he takes a second to recover what just happened. And after processing that he just watched Carl, the big sumo wrestler, get thrown like he was a stick by some skinny nobody scholar that he's never seen before, he realizes his foot is now bleeding, and he gathers himself for a second, and he starts going like, how can anybody like this exist in the world? This guy is not human. He's got to be something more than human. This is insane. But of course, he manages to, after taking a minute, get up, dust himself off, and he stealthily, in case he runs into this guy, makes his way back to where he was staying. And by the time he gets back, news had already spread, and they had actually brought Carl back. Some of the other guys had gone. They had picked Carl up, who still was knocked out cold at this point. He wasn't dead, but he was knocked out cold. They had carted him back to where all the sumos were staying, and he still was just absolutely flabbergasted at what just happened. This was insane. And needless to say, Carl had some major injuries. Like, you don't get thrown 12 feet, being a big guy, slamming into the ground and getting knocked out cold from it and just walk away. So, needless to say, he didn't participate in the festivities that year. But after returning back to wherever he was staying, Narimura, seeing Carl, one of the favorites to win this whole thing, like he was a beast of a man, seeing him just out cold, he goes to his sponsors and he tells them this story about this crazy strong scholar guy that they had run into. And Narimura just insisted that this guy had to be a former sumo wrestler himself. He was so strong and so skilled and knew so much about how to handle himself physically that he had to be. There was no way. And not only that, but if this guy was in the sumo contests, there was no way Narimura was going to beat him. This guy was way too strong. It was crazy. And Narimura's sponsors hear this, and they're kind of like, bro, look, you're telling us that among all of these soy boy nerds, that one of them was able to kick your butt so hard? Are you sure you saw what you saw? Are you sure there's something else not going on here? And why wouldn't this guy be a sumo wrestler if he was that good? Like, you're not going to get to crazy fame just being like another scholar like so many other people, but being a really, really successful sumo, there's way more opportunities for you. But they heard his story, and although they found it a little hard to believe, they had no reason to distrust what Narimura was saying, so they all decided to go to the emperor, and they told the emperor about it. Said, hey, here's what happened. And the emperor, who was part of this big sumo wrestler culture, instantly was very interested and set about trying to find whoever this was. But in the end, nobody could find him. He just disappeared back into the college dormitories. Nobody ever heard from him. Nobody ever saw him. Clearly, he didn't want to be a sumo wrestler. He wanted to be a scholar. And I respect that, because that's kind of what I'm trying to do right now. But even to this day, that man remains unknown. And thus is it said that this was a very peculiar incident indeed. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much. Ito katajike no koso haberi kere. You know, I messed it up in the last video. I said owashitare, which isn't the correct term. That's not correct, but I said it right this time, okay? Again, thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Share to all your weeb friends especially. Get the word out, as it were. And this was a really fun story. The next several stories are actually going to do with sumo, which, again, it's best to think of sumo not as big professional wrestler guy, but just a strong man is the best way to think of it. But these are actually some of my favorite stories because they have a really folktales-y feel to them, and they're a lot of fun. Like this one, they're a lot of fun, a lot of crazy things happen, a lot of things that obviously aren't true, but you know, campfire stories are great. There's a reason tall tales are things. There's a reason why we like superhero movies. We like things that aren't real. We like to imagine. But again, that's going to do it for now. Much appreciated. And I'll see you, hopefully, in the next one.